Good morning. Thank you all so much for registering to attend this webinar. We are starting with the house rule on the screen to give some time to everyone to connect. And then we can get started. So, thank you again for joining this webinar. We are here today to discuss the main drivers and obstacles for public acceptance of PCIs, to explain why public acceptance of local communities and stakeholders is important for the design and implementation of projects of common interest, to present good practice examples of how awareness raising and public engagement can improve public acceptance of PCIs, and to give a general overview of how communication tools can play a significant role for awareness raising, public engagement, and improve public acceptance. To do that, we are happy to have together with us today the following people, as you have seen in the agenda, from the European Commission to discuss public acceptance of projects of common interest. We have Mr. Joachim Balke, who is the head of Unit for Infrastructure and Regional Cooperation of the Directorate General for Energy. We have Mr. Eftis Altitsiadis, who is the co-founder and scientific lead of White Research, who is partner in the project Innovative Actions and Strategies to Boost Public Awareness, Trust and Acceptance of Trans-European Energy Infrastructure Projects, who will give us an overview of the processes undertaken for identifying key drivers and obstacles for public acceptance of PCIs across Europe. We have the pleasure to have Mr. Michael Mahone, who is the Chief Infrastructure Officer of Fairgrid, and who will share with us his experiences from the Celtic Interconnector and the respective activities undertaken for enhancing public engagement and improving public acceptance. We have Mr. Roberto Locatelli, who is the Head of Business Development of the Somplago Wurmlach project of Enel, who will discuss the importance of early engagement with local communities and the effectiveness of public consultations. We have Mrs. Stefan Batke, Senior Manager of Communications for the Renewable Grid Initiative, who will present best practices for communication and engagement in grid development. And finally, we have Alex Stylianou, who is Head of Communication Services Delivery in Intrasoft International, who will present tools and practices for designing and implementing public awareness campaigns on PCIs, taking stock of the experience that we have had in the Innovative Actions study. Before giving the floor to Mr. Balke, I would like to ask you to please take a look in the housekeeping rules and keep in mind that while we are presenting, you will be notified by the session administrator in the chat in order to vote in the Mentimeters. Please use the Q&A for posting your questions. This will be addressed during the Q&A session later. I wish you all to enjoy this event. Mr. Balke, the floor is yours for starting this event.
Thank you very much, Tonya, for this introduction. I hope, first of all, that you can hear and see me well. That is the case. Excellent. That is always the biggest worry already in the beginning. So if that works well, then let me also from my side welcome all participants here very warmly to this seminar. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining, and in particular to our consultants from Intrasoft and to Tonya for having set it up. We look very much forward to the discussion with you today. From my side, just a few words by way of introduction. So I think it is really very, very important that we meet today and discuss what is really one of the key aspects related to our infrastructure policy and to the implementation of our projects of common interest. And that is the aspect of acceptance of such infrastructure projects by the local communities affected by them. That is certainly something which for our unit, Unit C4, the infrastructure unit, is a key aspect of what we're looking at when we assess our PCI policy and how effective it is. Now, very good to see that we are joined today by a very diverse audience from a range of institutions and actors, project promoters, regulators, representatives from ministries, but also, of course, NGOs. All of you, once again, very warm welcome to all of you. it's of key importance that PCIs are implemented in a timely manner, and that does concern all of us, because it is the ultimate precondition to have a well interconnected and integrated European grid, which will benefit our citizens and our local communities, because it is a key condition. It is a key condition for us to succeed in the bigger challenge, which is ultimately the Green Deal. I think both are really intimately linked. We do need to be able to modernize our infrastructure in a timely manner, and we can only do that with the support of local citizens. Otherwise, quite simply, we will fail in that bigger challenge. It is, on the other hand, of course, not a new challenge. Quite to the contrary. In our current infrastructure policy and in our current 10E guideline, we have addressed this issue already since 2013. We have established a new approach in that current 10E policy to cross-border energy infrastructure planning, which does bring together stakeholders in regional groups to help with the selection and implementation of such projects of common interests. And that is key, that we have this regional cooperation structure, which help us discuss the merits and values of such infrastructure projects, their challenges, because these projects are ultimately needed to help with the integration of renewable energy and to complete the internal market. In that sense, regional cooperation is really a cornerstone for the selection of these key infrastructure projects in Europe. And it is also very important that these regional groups give us the occasion to monitor the implementation of projects, to ensure that this implementation is then also in line with the highest standards in terms of technology, but also environmental protection, and that it does continue to follow the imperative of having citizens engaged fully. If we look at what we've achieved so far with the 10E regulation, we have come, I would say, more than halfway. We see that over 4 key PCIs are already implemented, and further 75 projects we estimate will be implemented by 2022. And all of these help us with market integration, security of supply, and of course, crucially also the integration of renewables. So we have advanced, but I think we do need to take into account of the fact that the Green Deal and the objectives linked to it, both in a 2030 and a 2050 perspective, do require us to, in fact, accelerate this modernization project of our infrastructure, and hence we do, in a sense, have to become even better when it comes also to identify the right projects and to be sure that they are then realized in a way that citizens can agree to. It is always an underlying, let's say, tension in this process that we have, on the one hand, a very high degree of support from the general public to the general objectives in terms of the green energy transition, in terms of the change in our, in particular, electricity system that has to come about. While on the other hand, translating that into support for concrete infrastructure projects on the ground is not always so obvious. That does remain a challenge. We often see that the process of constructing and upgrading these electricity grids in Europe does still meet reservations from citizens, and that for a variety of reasons that I'm sure we're going to go into more in detail now in our discussion. There is certainly, in some cases, a lack of information about the benefits of such projects. There is, I think, also in some cases, a lack of agreement on the necessity for certain projects. I think that is also something which we have to ensure through the process, that we are promoting projects where there is a wide agreement that they are necessary. And sometimes we have also seen examples where the process has not been ideal in terms of early consultation of the population concerned, leading at least to a perception by local communities that they are not heard as much as they should be in the process. So I think it's very important that we look today in this webinar into examples where this has been done in a good way and from which I think we can all learn. Because failure to implement such projects does have serious consequences. These projects that we have identified, they do bring a benefit that can be calculated to our economy and society. And if we fail to implement them on time, these benefits will be lost. And that ultimately and quite concretely means that the energy transition that we all have in mind will become simply more expensive. And that is something that will also ultimately in the medium term then impact the acceptability of that energy transition. So this is why it is important that infrastructure projects which have been identified as ultimately contributing to, if you like, a cost-effective realization of this energy transition, that they are implemented without delay, because otherwise it does have consequences. Now, when we have looked at the current NE guidelines in preparing the review that we have proposed at the end of last year, we of course also looked at the experience with the provisions on public consultation and permitting more generally. We have seen that, as I said, I mean, we have quite good provisions, but the public consultation has also shown that there is perhaps still an effort to be done to optimize that. So what the current NE does, it sets an obligation on competent authorities to provide clear and open access information on the procedure, and it sets a condition, an obligation on project promoters to communicate early with the stakeholders on key aspects of these projects. Now we have also provided a range of communication tools to make that happen. We have a number of yearly events, the Sustainable Energy Week, the PCI days, or the Infrastructure Forum, where these issues are all looked at in detail. And I think these have been good occasions to exchange on collaborative solutions in that sense, and to identify good practices. The study that you've been conducting on innovative solutions to increase trust, awareness, and acceptance of PCIs is the last effort in that sense. Here we aim to have a closer look at drivers for public opposition across the EU and have really tailored local campaigns that would help to communicate in an open manner with the public to ensure that there is a higher acceptance. Now, as I said, in the 10E review, we've also looked at what has worked and what needs to be improved. We've had an extensive stakeholder consultation, which has helped us to gain valuable insights. In general, stakeholders valued the 10E requirements, but they did call for increased transparency and perhaps more meaningful consultations in some cases. We've also had recommendations from the ARUS Compliance Committee, which have fed into our proposal, where we do in fact propose to strengthen in some instances the transparency and participation obligations that are already in the current 10E, without, of course, while avoiding to create an administrative burden that would be too high for the project promoters. Now, by way of conclusion, of course, the regulatory framework is important, and it is important what we write in the 10E review and what will be the outcome of the legislation. But especially for the subject that we are discussing today, there is really no regulatory silver bullet. The regulatory framework can help, but it cannot, in and of itself, guarantee a good outcome. That is even more so the case in the current context of the COVID crisis that we're dealing with, which makes all kinds of involvement of the public in a sense more challenging. We have to develop new tools to do so. And we do, of course, also need to relaunch the economic recovery in the wake of that pandemic by ensuring that investment does come forward in a timely manner. Now, all of that taken together just means that it is really, I think, a very good and timely effort to have this webinar today. And I think without wanting to take more time, I look very much forward to your insights today as a source of inspiration for all of us working together to make sure that we will manage to bring our grid infrastructure in shape to be on track for net zero in 2050, basically. Thanks very much, and back to you, Tanya.
Thank you very much for this very insightful discussion from your end. We are very keen on having this discussion today in order to ensure that there is a better understanding of the need for improving public acceptance, for ensuring that there is an elevated level of trust, and to further explore how we can better communicate the benefits to the public and make sure that the projects, the different projects' objectives are fully acknowledged by all relevant stakeholders. So without further ado, I would like to present my colleague Eftis Altsitsiadis from White Research, who will give us an overview of how how we have used different approaches to explore the drivers and the obstacles for improving public acceptance. So, Eftis, the floor is yours.
Hi from me as well. I hope you can hear me and see the presentation at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And also thank you for inviting me here. I would like to give some insights as to what has been done and hopefully use this as a nice inspiration for the talks afterwards. I will not go too much into the technical details, and I will try to keep it as jargon-free as possible. So this is what we try to do. Very simple. We wanted to find out three things here. We wanted to identify what drives or stops people from accepting PCIs. We wanted to come up with a system that can help us prioritize which regions are more interesting for intervention, communication intervention. And third, come up with some good tips or ideas or don'ts or do's for our communication experts to make sure that they can achieve the increase of acceptance. For that, we used four different methods, and I'm going to use only one more slide to explain these methods, just so that you have an idea on how much work went into this. We studied what has been done before. We found 65 good sources in the literature. We had run a big series of interviews, approximately 2 for each member state. We validated what we found with 12 experts, project owners, and we ran a very large survey across Europe. We're using a lot of fancy statistics, yet you shouldn't bother too much with. Try to synthesize all of the findings there so that we can, at the end, use empirical based findings, not only opinions. Of course, the opinions of the experts filtered what we found in the surveys, identify the drivers and rank them, and come up with some recommendations and ranking for the regions. I'm not going to waste too much time into the objectives, but more into what was actually found. So the first little entity I'm going to be touching is the drivers and the barriers. What makes a difference when it comes to people accepting or rejecting PCIs? The first step was to understand exactly how we're going to measure this public acceptance. We used a complicated 3-item scale that not only took one dimension, but it took the likeliness of acceptance, the likeliness of support, and the readiness to support. We were very happy with the statistical confidence that the results gave, but here are the factors that were found to be the most statistically significant ones. People's belief that the PCI that will be established will contribute to sustainable growth at national level, the belief that the PCI will improve the image of the region. Peer approval was one of the strongest factors in support of changing the support. We also found a very strong effect of education. The more educated people, the more likely they were to support PCIs, as you can see on the graph on the right. And we also found that there was some effect coming from the employment of the people, what kind of work they were doing. I'm only presenting here the dimensions that were found to be important. In our, of course, report, you can find more details about what was not important and why is that. Um, why is that interesting? Is because if you play with other levers that are not important, you're probably not going to have any effect on changing how much people support your PCI. Now, we run what is called a conjoint analysis, a max diff version. People have to answer and put them which one is the more and the least important of these factors, and these are the results we found on a number of identified potential drivers and barriers. As you can see, awareness of the environmental benefits and transparency were highest in ranking. Some of the others were not. What we found is that when we talk to the experts, people like you did not, some of them did not believe so much that the environmental benefits were that important. Pretty much everybody agreed that transparency and fairness were a deal maker, and that the impact on local economy in some special cases was elemental. In some others, it wasn't too much of a considered too much of a leverage. For experts in Bulgaria, Estonia, and Czech Republic, the security of the supply was a dominant factor. For the rest of the countries, we didn't find that. That was about the positive part, the drivers, but what about the barriers? We saw that impact on air and water quality and health and safety were found to be the most significant ones, while lack of involvement of residents in decision making, for example, was not that important. Again, triangulating with what the experts said, the health and safety concerns are in the minds of some of the POs, and the declines in property values were a very, very dominant factor in most of our cases that we surveyed. Now, we picked up a lot of signals that are important for when you are designing communication, and this is what we fed to our communication experts. Take a look, for example, what was the picture when we asked them whether they're aware that they live or they don't live close to a PCI. In some countries, almost half the people did not even realize that they live close. So, for example, look at here in the graph, with the blue is people who are not sure whether they live close to a PCI. That got us a little bit curious, and we wanted to see if communication, if information makes any difference to these people. And here you can see a little graph that shows that when people are informed about the project that is going on, they are much more ready to be in favor. You can see on the left people who were in favor, and on the right you can see the small bar is the people who were not in favor. And you can see that when they are informed, the situation improves. And then we looked a little bit further on, and we found that that support drops when there was no social media or website information present for them to be found. And what we also found is that when they were used and when there was a website and social media presence, the lack of support dropped further. That signals that, yeah, probably communication is an important factor, exactly as Joaquin mentioned before. Another little cue here in this bizarre looking graph is that people do not perceive PCIs as similar as we think. So, for example, on the right, you can see that solar energy and wind farms, they're quite distinct to the other PCIs. More important, we run a segmentation analysis, a clustering technique, which is looking at our data and tries to find homogeneous groups that are not visible to the normal analyst eye. You cannot find these groups just by looking at the data. It's algorithmic. So we identified four sensible clusters, which signal that, of course, we knew that, but now we have more evidence for it, that people do not all fall into one category. There are different audiences here, and it's up to the communication strategy to decide which ones they're going to target, because they're quite different. You can see, for example, that cluster one is full of people who are very likely to accept, while, for example, the negatives, they score very low in acceptance. Then there are two more groups that we found that are very interesting for us. There are some that look like they're very, very eager to accept, but they still have some special treats, while as the moderates are a large group that is kind of reserved, but there is still hope there for them to be swifted to accept. These segments that we found differ not only demographically, some of them are more educated, they live in urban areas, but more importantly, they come with different behaviors. Some of them are more willing to be involved and they're more eager to listen than the others. We picked up a lot of these messages. I don't know if I have enough time to name all of them, but I will try to give you some of the headlines. Project owners think that the public does not care about the PCI status, and there is lack of awareness as to what is behind the letters of the PCI, but we need more evidence to understand if it's really so. We don't have the full evidence for that. Information can be very important when it comes to acceptance. It's already mentioned by Joachim. Communication strategies cannot go just blindly to everyone. We know that some of the some of the triggers work effectively. Some others might even have negative effects. If you are playing on some angle, sorry for them, yeah. If you're playing on an angle that does not only have an effect, you're wasting your time. If you are playing on an angle that has a negative effect, you might be, creating a backward effect. Environmental benefits are perceived differently. The local project and context matters a lot. You cannot go and have one communication that will fit everything. There are specific target audiences, and you need to be careful on how to address them. The local element is crucial. Last part of my presentation, these are the ideas that we came up with in ranking the regions that should be targeted as pilots for these communication campaigns. We run different tests. Here is, for example, a very simple chart where we ranked countries based on the public acceptance that we found. Another idea was to go with awareness levels. It made some sense to target the countries that people are not very sure about what is going on in their neighborhood. Another scenario was to target by the presence of the different interesting target audiences. Here, for example, you can try to understand where you should be communicating by looking at the hopefuls, while as you could even go and rank your regions based on the different infrastructure styles, based on the ones that are more in trouble or less in trouble of being accepted. So we came up with 5 scenarios at the end. This was our recommendation. And with that, I think I can conclude my little presentation. I hope I was able to give you a little glimpse on what we found.
Thank you very much, Eftis. This was very useful. I think that it's important to have a good understanding of how things are behind the scene and what is the story in terms of how people find reasons to be accepting or not to be accepting this kind of projects. These reasons are by all means reasonable, and they have every aspect should be addressed by the project promoters, not only communication-wise, but also in terms of ensuring that the whole story is known, that the different problems are tackled, and the concerns of the citizens are taken on board, both in the design and in the implementation. And to showcase how this is being done in practice, we have with us Michael Mahon from EirGrid to present how they have communicated the benefits of the Celtic Interconnector. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tanya. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to come along and talk to you this morning. The presentation is titled Putting Communities at the Heart of Engagement, and we're focused on the Celtic Interconnector project. But I want to break my presentation into three parts. First of all, I want to share with you the experience we've had in terms of engagement for Celtic Interconnector project. But then I want to share how we've learned from that and how we're putting in place a new engagement strategy. And finally, I want to conclude with briefly talk about a different consultation that we're currently running and how we're implementing the new engagement strategy in practice now in Ireland today. So first of all, the Celtic Interconnector project is a project of common interest that's seeking to connect the Irish transmission system to the transmission system in France. Effectively, it's a 575-kilometre cable that we'll be installing in the next number of years, connecting into County Cork in Ireland to Brittany in France. It'll be Ireland's only connection, direct connection to the European continental grid. And it's very, very important to help Ireland move and to transition to more sustainable forms of energy, and to give us the opportunity to import electricity when there's a shortage in Ireland, if the wind isn't blowing, but also when there's plenty of wind in Ireland, to give us the opportunity to export that renewable energy to Europe. So the consultation process that we've run for the Celtic project to date is based on our 6-step framework for developing grids. And you can see with the different steps in front of you, the different ways in which we slowly develop the project to look at the different options, to see what technology is there. And from step 2, step 3, and step 4, at that point, when we don't have a final solution, we're engaging with communities to try and get their feedback and to get their input, so that as we transition to a kind of a full plan in terms of how we're going to deliver the project, we've taken on board the community's input as part of that. So we carry out through steps 2, 3, and 4, a kind of a multi-criteria assessment under the various different items that are there on the right of the screen, where we're looking at the technical, economic, the environment, the socio-economic, and the delivery impacts in terms of the project. And by the time we've got to step 4, we're trying to ensure that we've engaged in detail with all of the communities affected. So by the time we go into the planning process, that we have a level of acceptance of the project before actually we're going through that consenting process. And hopefully then we have the support of the communities, we're successful in the consenting process. And then we move into step 6, which is actually the construction of the project. The public engagement aspect of that started very early, when we're directly mailing and directly engaging and advertising the project at a local level. Even if we don't know the final solution, we're engaging with the different options and we're presenting those. We use a mobile information unit to actually deploy in particular areas that we can actually engage face-to-face with people and then share the information we have in terms of the project. We often call door-to-door with people, and we arrange local events, particularly around consultations, to invite people in and to try and get their feedback. And more recently on the Celtic project, to try and demonstrate the effect the project will have, we've actually used 3D visualization techniques to demonstrate, for example, the impact of the converter station and the impact it will have in the community in terms of how you'll be able to see it. And we were able to work with people to demonstrate that if they walk out the front door of their house, for example, and they're looking off into the distance, this is the outline they'll see of the converter station. And that's proved very effective to demonstrate to people that possibly doesn't have a direct effect on them in terms of the visualization of the project locally. What's been very important through steps 2, 3, and 4 is the feedback process. So each consultation, we look and we gather the feedback that we've received through the consultations, through the written submissions as well. And you can see the different types of issues that come up in terms of concerns around noise, vibration, health, EMF, etc. We take all of that feedback on board, and we work hard to make sure that that's reflected in our consultation report and the decisions that we're taking in terms of how we slowly evolve from a range of options to one final option to put into the planning process. And what's important as part of that then is the establishment of a community forum, so that we're maintaining that open communication channel with the community. It's very, very important that we don't stop communicating, that we don't just stop and then disappear. We need to maintain that. And for the Celtic project in particular, Michelle Walsh is our community liaison officer. Michelle is living in the community, and she's there to engage with people as we progress from one step of the project to the next. This is just actually a map just showing the impact that the project is going to have on a local level. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that the cable is coming onshore on a particular beach called Claycastle Beach. So first of all, we need to understand the impact that that's going to have locally. And we need to talk to the people locally and explain how we're going to install the cable, how we're going to minimize the effects, and how we're going to try and optimize it to make sure, for example, that it doesn't affect the tourist season that will be taking place during the summer months. And we need to optimize that and work with the locals. The next thing we have to look at is that as we're typically using the road network to install this cable, but when we come to kind of particular towns that have had a lot of disruption over the last number of years through upgrading water systems or telecommunication projects, etc., some of those towns, and I'm particularly talking about Calais and Castlemartin for this example, there's a significant amount of infrastructure already within the roads, and there's been a significant amount of disruption in terms of traffic. And these towns are seeing a lot of traffic actually commuting to Cork City on a daily basis. So through working with the communities and working with the local landowners, we've ended up coming up with a solution that instead of going through the middle of the town, we're now actually progressing the project by actually using the existing land, working with landowners, and we're going to install the cable across some farmland instead of transiting through the rest of to the main street of those towns. When it comes to the landowners, then we've engaged with them, and there's particular points like around Calais and Castlemartin when we're bypassing a town, or at key parts of the project where there's a very, very difficult or very small roads with tight bends, etc., where we need to utilize farmland. So we've engaged with the farmers, and we've agreed a process that we utilize some of their land to install our infrastructure. And finally, then, in terms of siting the converter station, so this is a very big structure. And through the consultation process, we listened and we got the feedback from the locals, and we decided to install the converter station in an area called Carrytool, which has a lot of industrial development, as opposed to some of the options we had was we're going to install it beside the substation, which is kind of more in a more rural setting. So it was very, very important that we maintained the contact, the engagement, and very, very importantly, what's worked well for us is to demonstrate that we've listened and the decisions we've taken are based on the feedback we got through the consultation process. And as a result of that, I think we've been successful in developing the project to date. And we were recognized last year by the Renewable Grids Initiative for the efforts we've done in terms of the Celtic Interconnector project to really effectively engage with communities to gain their support. But for us, we couldn't stop there. We constantly need to look at new ways of improving in terms of how we're engaging. People naturally resist change. There's a lack of trust when somebody new comes into a community and proposes a project that's possibly going to affect people in the community. There's also a feeling when we're developing projects like this that the decisions are being taken not in the community, it's being taken by that project developer. And sometimes the benefits are not clearly understood as well. So they don't understand the net benefit. And what I find often very challenging for projects of common interest, like the Celtic Interconnector, is that the benefits aren't necessarily seen at a local level. They're often seen at a national level. So you're faced with the question, but why are you putting it here? There's a benefit for Ireland, but why is Cork having an impact? So we need to be very open and honest about the national benefits, and we need to create some local benefits as well. So for example, a community benefit fund that kind of recognizes the impact and tries to give something back locally is very, very important to demonstrate that there are local benefits as well as the national benefits of projects like this. For us, engagement is the key to overcome those challenges. And the engagement is not just one way. So it's not just us providing information. It's us actually listening, taking on board that feedback and acting on that feedback and working and trying to create some small solutions, some small changes that might make a difference in terms of the impact of the project, but also actually demonstrates that we're actually willing to work with people locally. For us in EirGrid, we've come to conclude that for big projects, the big infrastructure projects like the Celtic Interconnector and other large infrastructure projects, there's a real technical challenge there. It's like climbing a mountain. But that technical challenge really, when you're looking at the people on the screen there, is nothing compared to the acceptance challenge we're faced with projects like this. So we need to work hard on the acceptance bit, and we feel that that's one of the single biggest challenges we have on delivering infrastructure projects. And we factor this in then to the development of our new engagement strategy, which we've launched in February of this year. And a lot of that comes from the learning on the Celtic Interconnector project. For us, our new public engagement strategy, the first and most important point is the social acceptance. And we need to work towards solutions that have landowner and public support. We need, before we engage, we need to understand and we need to consider the impact of the project at a local level. And we need to engage with that knowledge in mind, and we need to be honest and open in terms of those impacts. And we need to work with communities to optimize the different solutions or the different options we have to develop the project. We need to actually demonstrate that we're giving something back in terms of the enhanced community benefits. And we also need to deliver kind of education campaigns to demonstrate why we need to transition from fossil fuel projects to green energy projects, and the rationale as to why we then need to adapt the transmission system to enable us to actually connect all of this renewable energy to the system. To do that, we need to increase our engagement capacity. So we need to invest more time in our people and in terms of the different techniques in which we engage with local communities. And what's also very important then is partnership. That we need to recognize that we can't do this on our own. We need to work with our government to actually run campaigns to demonstrate that there's actually the net benefits of moving to a more kind of green solution. To demonstrate the impacts in terms of climate change and how we can actually, from an electricity transmission system point of view, make a big difference. We need to strengthen the relationship with local communities. And we also need then to partner with a lot of the other organizations that are developing projects locally or to work with people locally to make big benefits to the local economy and to the local environment. This new engagement strategy for us is just one of 5 different things that we're looking at the moment. So with the engagement strategy at the center, we're adapting our public-facing website to make the information on our website more accessible to people who are looking for particular information on our project. We're also running a national advertising campaign to actually demonstrate the positives in terms of adapting the electrical infrastructure to help us to move and to help us decarbonize our society. We need to be clear about the community benefit, and we're looking at expanding the community benefit fund to give a little bit more back locally. That's all actually focused on helping us to achieve the target that the Irish government has set, is trying to get to 70% of renewables renewable electricity on our transmission system by 2030. And that's a huge challenge for Ireland. We're an island nation. We have very little connectivity at the moment with the rest of Europe, but we're already kind of world leading in that last year we reported that we operated the electrical system with 43% of the energy coming from renewable sources. So our target is to increase that on an annual basis to 70% by 2030. And we're really trying to step up to deliver that challenge. And shaping our electricity future is the current consultation that we're running. And it's very, very important to help us achieve the 70% by 2030 target. The consultation is focused at that 70% target. And it's a national consultation, and it's the biggest consultation EirGrid have ever tried to run in Ireland, because it's really trying to actually kind of win the hearts and minds of people in the community, of people in industry, people in government at a national level and a local level. So as part of that advertising campaign, and it's demonstrated, we're using it to effectively test trial the new engagement strategy. We try to open new channels in terms of engagement. So Irish Rural Link are hosting a number of rural community workshops for us as part of that. We've engaged with the business community through Chambers Ireland to contact a lot of the local businesses and demonstrate the importance of actually transition to renewable forms of electricity. We're working with the National Youth Council. They're hosting a number of local workshops and then a national assembly to try and make sure that we're getting the voice from young people in society to demonstrate the importance they have. Last week, we actually held an industry forum where we're engaging with a lot of the large energy users who are actually looking at developing new projects in Ireland. And over the next couple of months, we'll be running a civic society forum where we're engaging with people from academia, from agriculture, from community, the environment, and the social justice background to really engage and to inform people of the different options we have, because it is a consultation, to get their feedback and then to make sure that that feedback is incorporated in the final decision we take. And also then in Ireland, we've had what's called a citizens' assembly in the past, where the government have selected 99 people at random and one chairperson to sit and to be informed on a particular subject and then to debate and to form a kind of a national view. So we're actually running a similar type of consultation next month. And we're also heavily investing in time at the moment in engaging with local authorities and with government departments to brief them on the importance of this consultation. So we launched the consultation in March. The rural workshops and youth workshops took place in March. The youth assembly was last week. Our CEO and some of my other colleagues briefed the National Parliament and in particular the Climate Change Committee of the National Parliament yesterday. We'll have our Civic Society forum running through May, and our consultation closes in June. And what's important then between June and September is we're taking a decision. We've presented 4 different options. We're open to which final option we take forward to actually develop and implement in Ireland over the next 10 years. But what's important is that we're demonstrating, we're listening to the feedback we're getting, and we're demonstrating as part of our final decision why we've chosen the option that we have chosen. And for anyone interested on it, you can see the link to the website on my presentation there, because it might be useful for other parties to actually see how we're running a consultation like this. So finally, I'd just like to thank you for your time. And I suppose in concluding, I'd like to emphasize that it's important to engage early with communities, to be open and transparent, and to be very honest as part of that, to demonstrate the impacts, and most importantly, to listen. And when we listen, to respond and to demonstrate that we're actually really taking on board the advice and feedback from the local community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your presentation. It was very interesting, and it's very inspiring to see how you have involved the different stakeholders and the community for engaging in this project, for actually expressing their views and their concerns and taking them on board. It's indeed a good practice example, which we think should be followed by all. If there are any questions for Michael, please post on the Q&A. I understand that there are also some voting opportunities in the Mentimeter, so please check the chat and try to vote. And now I would like to give the floor to Roberto Locatelli for presenting the experience from the Wurmlach-Somplago project.
Okay, thank you very much, Tonya. Good morning to everyone. First of all, can you see perfectly the presentation on the screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as introduced by Tonya at the beginning, I have today here as a representative of Alpe Adria Energia, as responsible of the technical development of the PCI interconnection project on Somplago Wurmlach, including the permitting activity. First of all, I would like to thank very much the European Commission and Intrasoft International, because they give the Alpe Adria Energia and the interconnection project Somplago Wurmlach the possibility to be part of the initiative Innovative Action to boost public awareness, trust and acceptance of electricity PCIs. In this month, we strictly cooperate in order to structure the pilot campaign as much as effective as possible, dealing, of course, with the current development status of the project, which is still in the permitting phase. We generally think this has been an opportunity on one hand to spread a bit more in the area, in this local area when the project is developed, the importance of the PCI initiatives, and on the other hand, to launch some messages about the benefit and the plus of the interconnection project itself, contributing together to enhance a little bit the public acceptance of the project. The idea of our presentation today is to share with you the experience gained during the years by years development of the interconnection project Somplago Wurmlach, mainly on the public engagement point of view. My presentation is structured in 3 main points: a brief introduction on the project and on its history, which is important to understand the framework, the communication strategy we use, and the activity we perform in this year to enhance the public acceptance and dialogue with local communities. The project we are talking about an interconnection project, 220 kilowatt, which is linking the Austria with Italy, and the nodes of Wurmlach in Somplago, where we are foreseeing a new substation, and the existing substation of Somplago. The history of the project, as you can see, starts many years ago in 2004, when we first started the authorization procedure of the interconnection Somplago Wurmlach, presenting a request of authorization first in Italy. One of the key aspects at the time was that in the same area, due to the high spread from energy price spread from Italy and Austria, there were more than one different interconnection project which was wanting to link Italy and Austria. And in particular, there were 4 different projects. The first was Alpe Adria Energia project with 300 megawatt of thermal capacity. There was the so-called Fantoni project, a little bit for 150 megawatt of capacity. The Burgo one, with the same rate of the Somplago or the Alpe Adria Energia initiative, and the last one, another proponent which name is very similar to the Alpe Adria Energia one, but is Alpen Adria Energy Line, which developed a little project of 150 megawatt. So this area was so crowded of different initiative, and the attention of local communities and its representatives, municipality and Friuli Venezia Giulia region were so high on the impact that so much project could have in that mountainous area, which is in Italy. Due to we started the permitting procedure in 2004 with a complete overhead solution of the problem of the project, And since the beginning, in such mountain area, we faced opposition from citizens and local communities, including not only for our project, but all the projects presented there, including public demonstration, which in some cases take also strong participation from citizens. At the time, the idea of Alpe Adria Energia was nevertheless to continue the development activity of the project and the permitting without taking specific and strong care on power acceptance. So in 2011, we reached with this overhead line solution, the EIA, we closed the EIA procedure of the project, which is an important permitting step. As you know, maybe the most difficult one to finalize. In 2012, taking into account also the request from politics and the local communities, we tried to to do some synergies with other projects, and we merged with other initiatives, so the Fantoni one, the Burgo one, in order to let the impact in the area a little bit less important in terms of use of the soil and so on. In the 2013, we obtained the PCI status in the first PCI list with the PCI number 3.4. Okay, but due to the opposition from local communities that still were rising, also the Friuli Venezia Giulia, so also the politics take the position against the project and against the overhead line solution. And in particular, also the formal position of Friuli Venezia Giulia in the regional energy plan inserted that expresses his preference for a totally underground cable. In 2016, we did the integration with the last project, which was still present in the area, which was the one developed with Alpe Adria Energy line. And according to the request of the politics, mainly the local communities, we started the development of a different solution of the project. Completely underground. And at the time, we change our way to deal with the local community, with citizens and communication and their participation, start a new phase of dialogue with local communities and their representatives. I would like to underline that being our project part of the PCI list since 2013 and being started the authorization phase in 2004, the process according to TENI regulation and Article 9 is not obliged to present a complete communication plan and to do formal action of transparency and public participation. So this new phase was chosen by the proponent on his own choice. According to the problem we faced during our history, which were the main challenges faced in the public acceptance. One was the effect of electromagnetic fields. The second one was the fear from citizens about the huge private land use and the loss of value of the property interested by the project. And the one other problem, of course, I have to underline, is the use of the project from some politicians as with the aim to gain more local consents. So which was the strategy we adopted? We strongly believe that the communication action of a proponent for PCI project, of course, should be supported also by authorities and representatives, so that we involved Friuli Venezia Giulia region, the municipality, in order to have their support in the dialogues with citizens. And so once we designed the first hypothesis of new routing for the underground cable, we started this consultation phase with these three main stakeholders before start any permitting process. we are talking about 6 different municipalities and involved in the project, and of course the Friuli Venezia region. What we do to start with this activity? First of all, we meet with majors just to have the feeling and to have their perception and their filter about the instances that rises from citizens. We after these first meetings, we define a public debate with the direct participation of citizens, and after this, we continue talking and meeting representatives of citizens. Which were the messages we used according to the experience we did in the past. We stressed the respect of the environmentals. We stress the minimization of our project about the electromagnetic fields actions. Also stressing the fact that the project includes major solution to minimize such impacts, such as the use of electromagnetic shields. We stressed also the minimization of the private land use that an underground table running below roads, mainly below roads and streets, can ensure to the citizens. And also we stress the importance of the benefit of the project on the system, so more in general for Italy, for Europe, and for the region, but also to local communities. We are talking about potential impact on the price of energy price, and we are talking about potential opportunity of work in the area. We're talking about a mountain area when the economy is not running so speed in this period. Which media we use? We of course use the municipality public register. As I mentioned before, we try to have the support of authorities and representatives as much as possible, local and national newspaper, local TV, and as I mentioned, we did such public debate on video and was uploaded on the official websites on institution. We use also Friuli Venezia Giulia website and our company website. Particular focus on the public debate we organized. This public debate, of course, was open to the public. His organization was proposed by the project promoter and organized by local community managers. This to give the idea of an institutional framework all around the project. As mentioned before, was promoted through newspaper, website, radio communications, and in the agenda were included also the participation not only of the public, the promoter, but also from other participants. Of course, the public promoter, which shows the project and main future, stressing the messages that I talked before. There was also the Istituto Superiore di Sanità, which is the Italian Health Superior Institute, which talks about electromagnetic fields impact on the health of people in the short and the medium long term. So very interesting presentation from them. There was also ARPA, which is the regional agency for environmental. We talk about environmental electromagnetic field legislation, but not only, because it talk also about environmental law and explained in detail all the procedure that are followed by this regional agency in order to assess the project and to be sure that the impact on the area and the environmental is adequate. There was also the Friuli Venezia Giulia region, which talks about the authorization process that the project will follow. At the end of such presentation, there was a Q&A section with the possibility for all the citizens participating to the event, to ask questions, to express their opinion, and give also their suggestion. It was a pretty good experience. During our presentation as project promoter, we show the routing in detail, using also for instance, the Google Earth tool to give the idea of people in where the cable in detail pass. And also we noted that also the suggestion in some cases of people were also were interesting in some cases, because they know, of course, very well the land and the area. So in some cases we take directly note about their suggestion in this event. Of course, during the event, we noted the same, mainly the same fears from same concern raised from the citizens. So again, the fear of electromagnetic fields, the use again, the loss of value of land, of private land, and their use. And they was a bit afraid about the benefit on local communities, which was a special focus for them. Taking note about the suggestion during this public debate, and according to the summary that the majors gave us about the figure of the local population in the next meeting we had, we implemented some modification directly on the project. For instance, we implemented routing changes of about 30% of the route, which is a very large modification to the project, taking into account the suggestions of cities and the local communities. For instance, in some cases we use some bicycle path in order to pass a little bit farther from the towns. In some cases, they explained us also some possible different routing passing in habitat area closer to the river. So it was a pretty effective activity we did. We involved, due to the change of routing, 2 more municipalities that were not originally affected. This, of course, as you know, has not a little impact on the permitting activity, because 2 municipalities more means 2 more important stakeholders to deal with. We implemented a lot of electromagnetic shieldings during the routing of more than 5 kilometers, which is around 13% of the extension of the routing in Italy. We do also an activity of estimation in certain particular point in which we perceived care from citizen about the impact of electromagnetic fields, estimating the real maximum value for a scene in certain point. This in order to give the idea of the distance between the low limit of the electromagnetic fields and the values we are ensuring to the people. We also foreseen for what was possible, of course, the cable in a deeper position, which was a request which we received in a general way from citizens and their representatives. All these modifications, of course, have an impact in terms of money, 2 million euros around. But of course, we believe that such impact, which is almost the 5% of the total amount of the cost of a project, was well implemented. Of course, also in the once where we started the permitting phase after implementing this modification, we continue to be in strict contact with the municipalities, with the citizen representatives and Friuli Venezia Giulia, in order to find in certain ways some technical feasible improvement without affecting, let me know, the the overall strategy of the project, the overall technical features, but with the aim to improve some little situation that maybe we didn't took into consideration in the first phase. What was the result of such activity we did? Compared with the past, we saw a very, very strong improvement of the perception of citizens about the project. Of course, we have some local opposition in the area, but this opposition has significantly decreased compared to the past year. So from our experience, we can say that an early engagement of citizens, local communities, and also their representatives and local institutions can bring a positive effect on the overall process of development of such type of big infrastructure. Thank you very much for your attention again.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I see that there are some questions. We are going to follow up with the questions after the next presentation. If there are more questions, please post in the Q&A. Let's follow up with the representative from the Renewable Grid Initiative, Mrs. Stephanie Battier, who's the Senior Manager of Communications, to present best practices for communication and engagement in grid development. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my presentation and can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot for inviting me, and good morning to everyone. I just want to quickly flag before I start that I have some computer issues and that my screen keeps going black. So if you see me looking irritated at the camera, that's probably why. But I'm hoping I'm going to get well through this presentation. So as Tonia said, I'm going to talk about best practices for communication and engagement in grid development. And I'm hoping that I can share some insights today that will hopefully spark some new ideas for some of you. That's the goal, at least. Next slide, yes. So I want to quickly say who we are, because not all of you might know who the Renewables Grid Initiative is. So we're a unique collaboration of NGOs and TSOs from across Europe, engaging in an energy transition ecosystem of actors. So that means we all work together, but we also work with stakeholders beyond our immediate membership. And we promote fair, transparent, sustainable grid development to enable the growth of renewables to achieve full decarbonization in line with the Paris Agreement. And of course, in line with biodiversity legislation and with people's concerns. That's the ambition. And our members come from all across Europe. So just a quick representation to see where everyone's from. And this hopefully gives a good indication as well that we have a huge collection of best practices from many different actors from all over Europe. And yeah, that's also the ambition to for a lot of our work to share best practices, not just from our members, but also from beyond our membership, from all across Europe, and also from beyond Europe. So what we do as one main pillar of RGI's work is to collect best practices in reports, in a big database on best practices that we have that focuses on communication and participation, but also on environmental best practices, and to a smaller degree also on technical best practices when it comes to creating a more flexible renewables-based energy system. And then another big part is talking about it. So similar to what I do today, we often host best practice webinars. We do learning journeys where we share best practices beyond Europe. We do workshops where we exchange on best practices. And then we have the Good Practice of the Year award that feeds a lot of the best practices into the other activities I just mentioned and the other way around. You heard Michael say earlier that EirGrid won the Good Practice of the Year award for communication and engagement this year, actually last year. yeah, so also a call to all of you, if you have a good practice that you want to share, this is a really good opportunity. And it's an event. So the ceremony is an event that is usually hosted by the Commission. So this is also an opportunity to say thank you to the Commission for being such a supporter of the Good Practice of the Year Award. But let's dive into the PCI aspect of it all. So 1 second. Sorry, I think I'm missing a slide, but okay. Yeah, I have been invited to talk about good practices in connection with PCIs today. And the PCI legislation itself already introduces many concepts of public information and aims to trigger actual participation. Some of them you can list it below, can see listed below. But these PCI legal requirements are only a skeleton to build upon. So a sound skeleton is fundamental, of course, but it needs flesh and bones to actually be functioning. And depending on what you add to the skeleton, the outcome can be very different. So if you end up missing key components, you might end up with an unfinished version of what you had intended. And it might not even function at all. So this is just a way to hopefully illustrate that designing a stakeholder engagement process is absolutely not a trivial thing to do. And there's no guarantee to get it right if you don't properly invest in it. So some small practical hints about stakeholder engagement that I want to share are how important it is to actually understand your stakeholders, their needs, and the context that you operate in. So what we've seen from our experiences that stakeholders are very often pro-renewables, they very often have very legitimate concerns, and they have an interest in the best solution for all. So if you can make really clear why what you're doing is really intended to be the best solution, and you're open to hearing their insights into what can help making something the very best solution possible, that's very often half the battle. To just say, okay, we're open to your suggestions, and we're very eager ourselves to create what is best for everyone, so let's do it together. And then I guess you all know this, but of course most of the stakeholders invest their private time in this, so it's also a good thing to design a process that is very efficient and that doesn't take away too much time for anyone who wants to engage. And the second hint is to just actively develop your stakeholder engagement process in the sense that you really plan it out beforehand and not do it as you go along. But we've seen this from the previous presentations, that this is actually happening. And then this might also be common sense, but go out there before someone else does. So that you don't have to react to someone else's communication, but you are the one who are setting the communication agenda. And then different channels and formats are useful for very different target groups. So the call is just to be creative. And I mean, this is very easy to say, but what does it mean in practice? Like, how can you be creative when it comes to communication and stakeholder engagement? And I want to share some examples today of creative solutions that are hopefully something new to you. So I'm staying away from the very tested and more ubiquitous best practices, such as infomarks, traveling information units, and will instead shine a light on some more out-of-the-box approaches that I'm also very keen to hear your opinion on. So these are nice approaches that I'm going to share that can enhance a stakeholder dialogue or engagement. And I think they all fulfill the brief of involving stakeholders that you see depicted here in a very meaningful way. Yeah, so they are best practice in their respective areas, but they don't necessarily or they don't actually constitute a full process, which should always be more holistic and have very many different components. To illustrate a well-designed and very well-implemented holistic stakeholder approach, we actually usually talk about EarGrid, but since they are here themselves today, I've decided to focus on something else. So such as, for example, Elia. Elia is the Belgian TSO. And for two of their main grid projects in Flanders and Wallonia, Elia actually decided to set up support groups that would discuss the interests and concerns of the projects and jointly look for better solutions before project start and throughout. And given their political neutrality and knowledge of the sensitivities of their provinces, the respective province governors were placed at the head of the support groups, which, aside from the governors, were made up of very diverse groups, community groups, business unions, environmental organizations, agricultural and farming unions. And before the launch of the planning procedure, meetings were held on a wide range of different grid-related topics, with a huge amount of information prepared for each meetings. And everyone could give input, and the groups remain active throughout the project. So not just beforehand, but throughout the entire project, with governors always being the ones vocalizing the concerns that might come up throughout. And it's really a way of considering public participation as continuous support and making the best decisions for everyone, instead of the other extreme, which is sometimes perceived as like acceptance is an annoyance that we have to deal with, but you can actually switch it around and make it something that's supportive to you. And it also ensures that you not just talk to all stakeholders yourself early on, but they also talk to each other and are able to consider each other's viewpoints and expertise as well. And yeah, the result was reduced opposition to the grid projects, and more knowledge and trust in the process. And next best practice that I would like to share comes from Portugal, from the Portuguese TSO. It's on virtual public engagement, so very timely. And REN decided to enable both environmental impact assessments and well-informed stakeholder engagement at a time where COVID-19 limitations made in-person visits virtually impossible. They used drone footage and satellite imagery to illustrate the territory of new transmission lines. And so they created videos that depicted the routes of transmission lines in two areas in Portugal, digitalized the environmental impact assessments during COVID. And as I said, it served a dual purpose. So firstly, it allowed the environmental evaluation committee to carry out their work without the need to visit the sites. And then secondly, the videos could actually be sent to interested stakeholders, used in clarification sessions with municipalities, and could be shown in public consultations and licensing processes. And thereby increasing local stakeholder participation and transparency regarding pathway choices for the projects. And all of this even at a time when personal conversations are so difficult. The next project I want to share comes from RTE, from the French TSO. I don't think this is current anymore, but it's a personal favorite of mine, so I like to share it at occasions such as today. And already back in 2015, RTE launched what was called My Territorial Projects on a crowdfunding website called, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Ulule. And all projects are meant to be direct compensation for a grid project. And once they have reached their crowdfunding goal, RTE would co-finance the project. And it's a way of compensation that creates local value, something that we've heard a lot about today, how important that is. So it creates local value directly in the area where RTE construction is going on, while at the same time closely involving citizens by having them develop projects themselves, contribute ideas and support their favorite approaches. So this ensures that only projects that a majority of locals would get behind and that a majority deemed useful for the community would actually be realized. So it's an example of creative direct compensation while also creating local value and giving some more visibility to RTE by sort of using the crowdfunding website as a display case for the type of things that they do. And the final practice I want to share today comes from ELIA again, but this time from the ELIA group. So together with the German TSO 50 Hertz. And it's called the Open Innovation Challenge. So basically once a year, the ELIA group poses a challenge. This year it's offshore grid integration that startups can apply to with a solution they have developed. And if the applicants make it through the first stage of the competition, they get a mentor at ELIA who guides them via the next steps of the program and helps them refine their proposed solutions before pitching them to the jury in the final round. And the most successful pitchers, the winners, win 20,000 euros, as well as the chance to then implement their solution within the challenging environment of a TSO. So this specifically the ELIA group. And it's a supervised pilot project for them to achieve a proof of concept. And then if the solution is successfully and fully tested, ELIA starts implementing it in relevant areas. So basically it's a way of attracting innovative ideas, making sure you stay ahead in terms of innovative approaches, supporting small businesses and creating new value at the same time. And ELIA so far has mostly applied this concept when it comes to technical innovation, but I can easily see something similar being applied to constantly innovate your stakeholder communication as well. So this is why I wanted to share this with you today. Yeah, and this was only a small glimpse at the best practices that we have in our databases and in our heads. So if you're interested to find out more, there are a lot of different sources on our website. We have a database, we have what's called the European Grid Report that we're actually currently updating and hope to be publishing a 2.0 version of this soon. So this is supposed to be a report that covers best practices in many different areas connected to grid development all over Europe. So if you are a TSO or an NGO that we haven't contacted yet about this, please feel free to just get in touch and contribute to the report. Yeah, and before I close, I just want to mention that a lot of the practices I've talked about today don't necessarily pertain to offshore yet. And we're seeing so much offshore development at the moment that I just wanted to flag how important it is to actually translate the best practices we talked about today to offshore development as well. We have seen an attempt at this from the Dutch government in the form of the North Sea Agreement, where they actually brought all of the stakeholders at one table. And we are currently heading what's called the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature, or short OCEAN, which is a very fortunate abbreviation, and trying to do something similar for offshore as well. Yeah, so same call for action. If you have something to contribute, please get in touch, and we're very happy to discuss further on this. Yeah, and with this, I want to thank you all for listening, and if you have questions, I'm very happy to discuss further.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. This was a really inspiring presentation. I think a lot of useful information was there and a lot of good practices that could be taken on board by different stakeholders and promoters in the future. Hopefully we'll see more of that in the work of AirGrid and the upcoming activities that you guys are doing. And I'm
just seeing the light has been like this the entire time.
I'm afraid so, yes.
Yes. Okay.
It's, yeah, it's a little bit futuristic, but it's nice. So I would like to now proceed with the Q&As. We have only 3 questions here, but I understand that some of the colleagues will have to leave early. So I would like to address the questions first, and then we can probably go and have a look at the votes that you have casted so far in the Mentimeter tool. So I see a question here for Michael. It was posted during Michael's presentation. It goes, unfortunately, it's not always straightforward. We cannot ignore the exploitation in an anti-European function and the consequent counter-information campaigns launched by the anti-European movements by exploiting the great projects, their direct cost and their visibility. These campaigns are totally based on emotional content that has nothing to do with the technical and objective data and information of the projects. Emotional communication is, however, more powerful than technical communication. Moreover, for some information, a medium-high level of skills is needed, while emotional communication reaches and works on all skill levels. So, Michael, your reaction to that? I think it could be answered also by the other colleagues that made the presentation, by Roberto and also by Stephanie. But please take the floor and let us know what you think.
Thanks, Tanya. It's I suppose there's no easy way to answer this question. I think it comes back to the way we approach kind of the project in the first place, and how early we start engaging with people, so that we're constantly trying to provide the clear, kind of unambiguous kind of technical information. But we try to do so, and we've tried to present that information in kind of plain, kind of simple language that's easily understood by engineers or non-engineers. I think that's kind of the first point. I think there's nothing we can do to directly kind of counter some of the emotional maybe communication that's out there, other than a very honest kind of approach to answering the question in a way that how to put it, I suppose, allows us to kind of demonstrate that we're sincere about our efforts, that we don't see that there's necessarily a concern. I think sometimes we have to challenge the issues that are being raised and ask and clearly understand the specific concern that's there. And then when we understand the specific concern, to respond in an unambiguous fashion, to clearly kind of demonstrate that if there's a concern there, that this is how we intend to address the concern, or this is how this concern is naturally actually not there. And then to keep up that engagement with communities and with people, and so that we're building that level of trust. And ideally, I think another thing we need to do as part of this as well is that when you get into political circles as well, that we're helping to, again, provide information and trying to educate probably the key kind of political or local figures that people actually rely on, that people will go to, so that they're actually informed and have maybe a different view to some of the emotional kind of concerns that are being raised there locally. But it is a big challenge for all such kind of projects, and particularly for, I think, projects of common interest, which probably span over a large area, and the concerns at a local level can be quite different from one area to the next.
Thank you. I don't know if Roberto or Stephanie would like to react also to this question.
Yes, I would just would like just to add a point, which is that the comment of Eusebio is very important. This anti-European movement has an impact, but this is the reason why, as Alpe Adria Energia, we choose from the beginning on the communication activity to have the local representatives and the region on our support. So this is the way we try to deal with such a type of opposition.
Thank you, Roberto. Stephanie, please.
Yes. So yeah, I can only underline what Michael and Roberto have said. I think that's very true. I also think it's another argument for saying we actually need to create local value, and we need to make the connection between local value and national and European value. So I think that's an important challenge for us to tackle. And I just want to mention here that in terms of the arguments that generally come up when it comes to having a discussion as to whether is this project actually needed or not, do we need it here specifically? I just want to share that we have done in a project together with the German NGO German Watch, what we call an argumentation map, where we've actually pulled together all of the arguments that come from different groups. I mean, I'm saying all of the arguments. I don't know if it's fully exhaustive, but we've tried. When it comes to the question whether HVDC grids should be built or not. So we've tried to pool together all of the different arguments, how they scientific, civil society arguments, political arguments, and try to find the connections between them, make them visible. Yeah, and just try to get a sense of how you can navigate in terms of argument, like building a good argument when it comes to counter, especially like right-wing arguments as well. So yeah, this is, I can share the link in the chat if that's interesting for people.
Please do. I think it would be very useful. Thank you.
If I just
okay,
add one very little point here, Tonya, could be relevant to the discussion. We found also in our analysis a very strange finding that goes a little bit antithetical to what the question was. We found that there is actually trust in European sponsored. So if something is European led or European sponsored, that it actually has the benefit of increasing the acceptance. We were also a little bit puzzled because we were afraid of exactly this question. So it's not 100% clear, but it seems, at least based on the empirical findings, that it could be a potential sentimental trigger that we haven't played so much, especially because we're afraid of these anti-European sentiments and the activities that are going on, campaigns. The other little part that I want to touch, it's a huge point in marketing and campaigning, whether you should go sentimental or whether you should go rational. And I agree with Michael and the others that the rational speech with the arguments is a clear and good way forward. But I would also put that the European community and the community feeling is also a trigger that can be played sentimental.
Thank you, Eftis. This is useful. I think having such insights sometimes is very important because it shows the different perceptions of people and how we sometimes are mistaken in taking things lightly on this aspect. So I think it's quite important to have this view as well. I would move on to the next question, which is addressed to Roberto. I think it's a little bit more technical. And the question is, what were the impacts on the project, the consultation, public acceptance of the European Court of Justice decision concerning the environmental effects assessment? This decision reminded the need for a global environmental assessment of overhead lines of less than 15 kilometers in a member state if it is part of a bigger transboundary project. So if there was an assessment of the impacts of the whole project, I think that's the question.
Yes, as I mentioned in the presentation, the project started as an overhead line solution of 220 kilovolt, and the routing in Italy was approximately 40 kilometers long. So this decision of the European Court of Justice was applicable. I would like just to underline that this European Court decision made reference to those projects included into the EIA Directive Annex 1, and with reference to this the electrical transmission project, if I well remember, point 12 or 20, there is mentioned the construction of overhead electrical line with 220 kilovolt or more with a length of more than 15 kilometers and on and not less. However, our project was perfectly in the frame of this decision court. We, as you know, there was a strong opposition, but I mean, for our project, the specific area of in which the project is designed is not so affected by European decision and by European court decisions. So the opposition were mainly related to the general solution, so overhead line, landscape impact, the fact that there was a lot of project developed in the same area. So this decision was not a topic that leads us to change the technical solution and does not enhance the opposition of local communities. This is the perception we had in the past.
Thank you very much. And another question also addressed to you. I think while you were making your presentation, you mentioned that after the public consultations and taking on board the different concerns and changing your planning, you saw that there was a decrease in the opposition. Have you had a specific type of measurement? Have you used specific tools for measuring how the opposition has decreased?
Okay, mainly we have, as mentioned before, with the overhead line solution, we had public demonstrations against the project in the area, several. The participation at this public demonstration was pretty high, with hundreds of people, which in this particular area, which has a low density of population, are big numbers. Moreover, there was documents against the project which were signed from citizens and sent to authorities, to municipalities, citizen representatives, with 100 of signings. Now on, the situation is pretty different. The opposition are characterized by a low number of peoples. We are talking about 20 or 30 people which prepare and sign some opposition documents proposing some modification or something concerning the project, and we are not facing at all a public demonstration. So this is mainly the measure. This gives the measure of the less project opposition that we are facing in this area.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I see that there was a question addressed to Joachim, but as he left, I saw that Oana has already replied. I don't know, Oana, if you would like to respond live so that the rest of the participants can hear your answer. The question was, what will change in terms of procedures and public participation, transparency as a result of the revision of the 10E regulation, and whether there are any necessary national implementation steps, legal or practical?
Hi from my side as well. Yeah, I did try to answer in writing. I hope the replies are also visible to the participants. First, I want to thank everyone for your very insightful presentations. As I've mentioned, and I think Joachim already hinted, and you must already be aware of, in December 2020, we put on the table a proposal for a revised 10E. Last year we had, let's say, an extensive public consultation. One of the topics was how to really reinforce the current provisions on transparency and public participation. Stephanie has already hinted, I mean, what we put in the 10E is a skeleton. There's a lot of, extra things we need to do. And I'm glad to see that, the people you had, the promoters you had today go far and beyond to complement these minimum requirements. Nevertheless, on our side, we try to really apply the lessons learned. So with the recommendations from the Aarhus committee, with input from stakeholders and basically all the learnings in the past 7 years of 10 implementations, what we're doing now, we like to say we strengthen the existing provisions. So first of all, we propose to increase coordination and synergies between national competent authorities, so that procedures across the border, so cross-border procedures are openly accessible to promoters, so they can themselves better coordinate and really align in their procedures at national level. We kept the obligation on the project promoters to submit a concept for public participation and to make sure that a website for the project is available. It sounds like a small petty thing, but this has been pointed as one of the, let's say, the obligation that is very often, failed, not complied with, and is the first source of information for the public. And like I said, it sounds like a very small, very low-hanging fruit. However, it's the first one that gets not done properly. And what we really did, and I think this is where let's say the strength comes, is really try to close the loop. So basically, we're asking project promoters to report on the feedback received during the consultations and how this feedback has been taken into account. And this is in direct response to one of the Aarhus Compliance Committee's recommendations. So basically, to really show how different input has been taken into account. And today you've heard how this has been systematically done by some of our project promoters championing best practices. Before closing, I just want to say that do consider that these proposals are of coming from the Commission. So the what is it now currently on the table is undergoing interinstitutional negotiations. We're doing our best to defend the merits of these proposals. It's not easy to prescribe and really dictate from Brussels how to operate and how to increase public acceptance. We very much rely on the efforts of our project promoters on the ground, but at the same time we know that the Commission can further support, and we've been doing our best to facilitate and to help without being patronizing and really like I said before, trying to dictate. Acceptance is such a complex issue, and we've got better experts than the Commission than can provide us with inspiration. But I think that the set of proposals that we now put are really balanced without touching upon any kind of subsidiarity and any kind of, let's say, constraints, and do not create further administrative burden. And let's just hope the Parliament and the Council will safeguard our proposed improvements. So thanks for giving me the floor. I wish that was Joachim, so you stuck with me for the rest of the event, but thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think that we need to continue now with the presentation. So I expect that we will be able to share the results of the Menti at the end of the session, and then we can share the report with all the participants. So without further ado, I will give the floor now to Alexandros Stylianou to present tools and practices for how to design and implement public awareness campaigns on PCIs. On the basis of what we have experienced during the innovative projects, the innovative actions project. So Alex, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone. I'm happy to be here with you, even though I don't have the chance to look at you, which is weird. Let me first share my screen. I think I will find it sometime. While sharing, I would just like to say that this has been a very challenging project, communication-wise. Let me know when you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Because of the political conditions behind it, and the very delicate and very fragile balances that we had to juggle with. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. As I can see, I don't have too much time. The presentation is divided in three main themes: how to design an awareness-raising campaign, developing a media buying campaign for the Celtic Interconnector, which was basically our pilot and case study, and available communication tools for project promoters. So, designing an awareness-raising campaign on PCIs. What is the most important element when designing an awareness-raising campaign? First of all, identification of our audiences. Know your audience is the key to a successful communication campaign all the time. Our audience this time was a bit difficult both to reach and actually make them consume our messages. This was one of the biggest challenges we had to face. The second step is the formulation of key messages, apparently based on PCI benefits. The third step was the engagement with stakeholders and public through various tactics, and this is a very important step in the process, as we do not only want people and audiences to just be passive receivers of our messages, rather be engaged with those. This is the step that actually makes them advocates of whatever we convey. And the fourth step was the design and implementation of online and offline campaigns. I'll try to get through this quickly enough. This is the basic identification of our target groups and how we would eventually reach them. This is what we call the concentric cycle. It is not depicted well enough here because of the graphic element, but we show here eventually how much the target groups are distant from the info source. So in this case, the project promoter. Apparently, the project promoter has some direct contacts, which is the European Commission, the Directorate, the DG for Energy, various institutes, representation, edX, and several other direct contacts. Then we have the multipliers, which for this campaign were ministries of energy, local and regional authorities, business intermediaries, and of course, media. These are the people who actually multiply our message and make it come to greater extent to the target groups. And eventually we have the target groups for this campaign were residents, landowners, municipalities and communities, associations, educational institutions, NGOs, and of course the general public. The formulation of our key messages. Apparently, key messages need to reply to the following questions in this case. What are projects of common interest? What are the benefits of those PCIs for the residents and the general public, for the local economy, and for the environment? I will pass through these slides quickly enough. You can browse through them after on your own time looking at the presentation. This is just the journey of the key message. We explain here what are the projects of common interest, what are the benefits of PCIs, 2 slides, and what is market integration, security of supply, and competitiveness by numbers. Before I go to the third step, it's something that I would like to mention concerning the key messages. We followed a methodology, let's say, that actually devises the elevator pitch, which is what we would say to someone from our target audience if we had only 3, 4, 10 seconds. What is the support for this? What is the point of this message? And eventually we reach the final key message. You will see it in you can see this in the material that you can download, and I can show you later on during this presentation. So I'll go back now to step 3, which is engaging with stakeholders and the general public. So we try to engage with them at all stages of the implementation because this was a fundamental and key element of this approach. This was actually what would limit possible opposition rather than come at some later stage. So some tactics that included citizens' dialogues, these were virtual apparently, online and offline surveys, webinars, community events, and open days. Now, step 4, designing and implementing the campaigns. On the one hand, we have online communication material channels. On the other hand, we have offline communication channels. We will come to a third also aspect. Let's focus on this one, those two at the moment. For online, apparently we have the project website where are regular updates with latest developments and the upload of all the produced communication materials. The promoter social media accounts, organic and paid, audiovisual material, and particularly the animated video that we created on PCIs. Finally, we have some web materials like the e-info sheet, which is an interactive PDF that people receive and click directly and are directed to various resources, and infographics for depicting key data and make them easily digestible for the target groups. The offline communication material channels include the campaign poster to be used during events, either physical or virtual events. This can be used in the future, hopefully, for physical events. The fact sheet for citizens that answers FAQs from the general public. This was a very tricky exercise to do because we would like to be as much as on the spot as possible. So we tried to utilize general public feedback and then create the FAQs. Leaflet to be disseminated during events, stands, community buildings. And now we come to the third aspect of the campaign, which is the media campaign, the media buying campaign, press relations and ads. This is particularly important for the media multiplier effect. We have the activity, we have the multipliers that we mentioned in step 1, which help us reach our target groups in greater strength. So we target all types of media at regional, local level according to local specificities and popularity. Newspapers and magazines, radio and TV stations, online news and sectoral portals. And also we disseminated the press kit, including press release and various campaign materials to journalists, editors, and reporters who would then retransmit it through their media to the target groups. Finally, we run media buying campaigns online and offline, and we will show you, wow, I'm running late, how exactly later on. Let's go to the second part of the presentation, which is developing a media buying campaign for the Austria-Italy Interconnector. Okay, I suspect most of you already know the case of the Austria-Italy Interconnector. The region is Udine. The promoters Alpe Adria Energia, implementation status permitting, it's currently at the permitting phase. It was launched in 2004 and it's included in the first PCI list. So the key elements of this media buying campaign. First of all, we targeted all of the target audiences. The duration was lasted for 1.5 months, and the media mix that we followed was digital campaign on major online local news portals. This is the online version. Advertorials in online and print media, local apparently. Radio spots in local radio stations, we cannot have them here. And outdoor panels at arterial roads, something like this. It was a quite effective mix from what we saw from the engagement that we registered. I come to the final stage of this presentation, which is probably the most important for you, the communication tools and channels for project promoters. The sources of information. Above all, the DG Energy website that serves as a one-stop shop for all issues related to PCIs. We can find their introduction to the Trans-European Energy Network policy and PCIs, example of PCIs and their benefits to the community, quite important, public acceptance of PCIs, funding, interactive map showing ongoing PCIs where you can access detailed technical information, and videos introducing PCIs. These are also quite important because we all know that currently in this era, the video is quite more impactful. Other available communication material. Following tools and materials have been designed to support the implementation of public awareness campaigns on PCIs. First of all, we created an engagement book to support project promoters in the design and implementation of their campaigns. Please download it. It's quite important. We also created a key visual for online and offline use. This is in general fundamental for an awareness raising campaign because it shows that everything is tied together. It has a consistent branding. People get associated with it. They see it once, twice, third time, and immediately it makes an impact. It becomes appealing to the eye, and they know whenever they see this again, these colors, these graphics that we decided to go with, and immediately they think of this campaign. This is why we used it all over throughout the materials. We have created a poster template, which is adaptable for online and offline use, which means that promoters can use it for their own event or for their own initiative, for their own project. A PPT template also open for editing, highlighting relevant elements of PCIs for use during project presentations. A fact sheet for citizens with ready-to-use argument answers to most common questions about PCIs. An info sheet directly linking several electronic resources, as we said earlier. And eventually, a video highlighting the importance and benefits of PCIs. What to keep in mind? I'm coming to an end. Early identification and engagement with all stakeholders on an adequate level is necessary. The closer to the start date of the PCI, the more the affected target groups begin to consider it more carefully. This is important to understand when we are going to launch our key messages and our material. Target groups taking the lead in each region are not the same. Each region's peculiarities need to be taken into consideration. Apparently, we cannot go with a campaign, one-size-fits-all campaign. There are particularities in each region that we need to take into account. I'm quite sure that you very well know this from your regions. Some further points. We need to ensure support from nearby regions other than the implementation area to facilitate public acceptance locally. Increase support among those in favor of the PCI and involve them in further consultation and campaign activities. And a combination of all communication tools should be used in line with regional habits and specificities. This, I believe, is understood because, first of all, we need to understand where we're going to meet our target groups, what type of channels and communication outlets they do consume. And the experience shows that we need to have a mix of a little bit of everything, online, traditional, let's say, print, events, and also media buying. Consultation and communication activities should continue at local level during the construction phase to mitigate objections and accommodate new concerns. This is a marathon, not a sprint. This is what this means. We need to be there. We need to constantly feed them with more information, make them little by little understand the benefits of this, and never let our messages subside, because when the message subsides, the target audience becomes passive. at the end, we have this video. You can click and see it on your own time. I will not consume any more time because I know that we're already 4 minutes past our deadline. You can follow and visit these resources. And that's it from our side. Thank you very, very much for listening, and we're open for questions or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. We are past our duration, so I assume that we will need to sum up unless there is any question from the audience. As mentioned, we are going to follow up with the session recording as well as the presentations, and we will also provide you with the report from Menti. Thank you very much for your registration and your participation today. It has been a pleasure to have you here with us, and hopefully this was an interesting event for you. We will follow up with a survey to rank how interesting it was. Thank you again, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.